My husband brought home his niece after his brother died, then I found out she was actually his daughter. Now he's begging me not to divorce him. For a bit of background, I'm 30, and I've been married to my husband, Matthew, who's also 30, for the past 5 years. Matthew has an older brother named Colin, who is 35, and Colin had been married to his wife Jackie, 32, for about 7 years. Matthew and I first met back when we were both in business school. We dated for nearly 7 years before tying the knot, so all in all, we've been together for about 12 years. As for Colin and Jackie, they met through mutual friends, and after dating for 2 years, they got married. So, they'd been together for almost 9 years themselves, another long relationship. We all got along really well. Colin and Jackie weren't just family, they were genuinely two of my closest friends. We'd often go out on double dates and hang out together like one big happy crew. I cared for them deeply, and I honestly considered them part of my own family. Just a year ago, Colin and Jackie became parents. I had even helped babysit their little girl multiple times. I never suspected anything unusual during those visits, never saw it coming. But about a month ago, everything changed. Colin and Jackie were killed in a horrible car accident. It was devastating, something that completely shattered our family. I've never felt heartbreak like that before. Their funeral was, without a doubt, the most emotionally painful experience I've ever been through. Matthew and I were absolutely wrecked. We cried so much that day it felt like our grief would drown us. The weeks since have been incredibly hard as we try to process the loss and somehow carry on. Now, the most heartbreaking part, and oddly, the most hopeful too, is that their 1-year-old daughter survived. She wasn't in the car that day, she had been home, thankfully. On one hand, that's a blessing. But on the other, it means she's now an orphan. No matter how much love we all give her, it'll never replace the parents she'll never get to know. After the accident, nobody knew exactly what the next steps should be. My in-laws decided they'd look after the baby temporarily while we all figured things out. They would have gladly raised her themselves, but there were some serious challenges. My father-in-law has motor neuron disease, and my mother-in-law spends most of her time caring for him. They're also getting up there in age and don't really have the energy to chase after a toddler full-time. So even though they wanted to help, they couldn't take her in permanently. Still, they agreed to keep her with them for a little while, just until Matthew and I came up with a longer-term solution. As for me, I had no issue with pitching in to babysit from time to time. But I had been very open with Matthew over and over again that I never wanted to be a mom. We'd talked about it a lot and both agreed that having kids just wasn't in the cards for us. So even though I adored Jackie's little girl, I knew I couldn't raise her. Becoming a parent was a huge, lifelong commitment, and it wasn't something I felt prepared for. I truly believed it would be better not to become a mother than to become one half-heartedly and do a poor job of it. That's why we started looking into adoption. The baby was still young and hadn't formed lasting memories of her parents, so the process would likely be easier now than if she were older. She'd been staying with her grandparents for a few weeks, but then 9 days ago Matthew came home from work with her in tow. He told me that he had taken full responsibility for her and that, from that moment on, it would be up to the two of us to care for her until we found the right adoptive family. I agreed to it because I believed it was only temporary. Deep down, I also couldn't bring myself to say no, not after what had just happened to Colin and Jackie. The grief was still fresh, and saying I wouldn't help felt wrong. It wasn't easy, though. We both had to make changes to our schedules, cutting work hours short and getting home earlier than usual. The sitter we'd found charged a ridiculous rate and refused to stay late, so we were left juggling responsibilities. We also had to adjust our home a lot in just a few days, but I was willing to do all of that for Colin, for Jackie, and for their baby. Honestly, having her around helped. She gave us something to focus on, something joyful, and helped distract us from the pain. I started getting attached to her, more than I thought I would. I even began to reconsider motherhood. I caught myself thinking maybe I could raise her. Maybe I'd been wrong about not wanting kids. But all of that came crashing down the moment I looked inside the bag Matthew brought home with her. He had packed up her things in a duffel bag, clothes, toys, and a few essentials. A couple of days ago, I went through it to find a pair of socks for her since the weather was getting chilly, and I couldn't find her usual ones. That's when I found a file buried at the bottom of the bag. I opened it, not thinking much of it, and what I saw left me frozen. Inside were her birth certificate and a paternity test. And that's how I found out Matthew was her biological father. I had stayed home from work that day because I was fighting off a cold, and Matthew was at the office when I made the discovery. At first, I just stared at the papers in disbelief. I kept telling myself it had to be a mistake, maybe it was fake. But no, everything looked official. After a few minutes of trying to process what I just read, I completely fell apart. I was in the middle of the living room sobbing uncontrollably, to the point that I probably scared the neighbors. I mean, after nearly 12 years together, you never imagine your partner keeping something like that from you. I never saw it coming. Not in a million years. It took everything in me to process what I just found, but after about half an hour of crying, I forced myself to pull it together. I wiped my face, stood up, and made the decision to stop falling apart. I picked up my phone and called my lawyer right away. I sent him clear pictures of the documents I had uncovered, just to be safe, and I also took the originals with me when I left the house. I still have them now. After that call, the full weight of everything really started to hit me. The sadness was overwhelming, but right alongside it was something even stronger: anger. And not just irritation or frustration. I mean rage. Honestly, angry doesn't even begin to describe what I felt. I was furious. And thank God Matthew wasn't home at the time, because I was so mad. I don't trust what I might have done if he had walked through that door. I'm not even embarrassed to admit that. In the middle of that storm of emotions, I made a snap decision. I grabbed my phone, snapped more photos of those documents, and sent them out to every single person in Matthew's family. And when I say everyone, I mean everyone. Anyone whose contact I had saved, even distant cousins or people I barely knew, I selected them all and hit send. The message I attached simply said something like, "Now I know the truth about Matthew. I think you should too." That was it. No long explanations. Just the cold, brutal truth. As soon as I sent the messages, I started packing my things. I didn't want to be in that house when Matthew got back. I couldn't even look at him. But as angry as I was, I knew I couldn't just leave Jackie's daughter behind. She was just a baby. None of this was her fault. She didn't ask for any of this. So I packed a few things for her too, scooped her up, and headed to my parents' place. I was already crying in the cab before we even got there. And when my mom opened the door and saw me standing there holding the baby with tears running down my face, I just completely fell apart again. I cried in her arms for what felt like forever, probably a full hour. I had turned off my phone before I left the house. I didn't want to be reached. I didn't want to hear from Matthew, or from anyone else in his family. I was deep in shock and pain, and I knew I wasn't in a good headspace to be talking to anyone. Honestly, I'm still not sure I'm okay even now. Once I finally calmed down enough to talk, I told my parents everything. I showed them the proof. I told them what I had discovered and how I had found it. They were stunned, but they told me I'd made the right choice, going straight to a lawyer and deciding to end the marriage. There was no coming back from something like this. Later that evening, Matthew showed up at my parents' house. But he wasn't there for me, at least, not only. He came to get his niece. He did try to speak to me, of course. He stood at the front door arguing with my parents for at least half an hour, begging them to let him talk to me. He said he could explain. He claimed there was more to the story. But come on. What explanation could possibly erase what I saw? What could he possibly say that would change what's already been proven? Part of me did want to go downstairs. I won't lie. A part of me wanted to hear him out, if only to get some kind of closure. But I didn't trust myself. I knew my emotions were still too raw, and I didn't want to end up doing something I'd regret. So I stayed upstairs, quiet. I let him yell and plead with my parents while I sat on the edge of the bed, numb. Eventually, he left with the baby, and only then did I turn my phone back on. The second it powered up, messages started pouring in. Tons of people had received the photos I'd sent earlier, and now they were responding. Most of them were apologizing, even though they really didn't need to. But I could tell their apologies weren't really about me. They were more like, "We're sorry this happened, but maybe you should just forgive him. You've been together for so long." You know that tone people take when they say something like, "We support whatever you decide," but they're clearly hoping you'll stick around? That's what most of the messages felt like. People were saying things like, "This is so shocking and unbelievable." But almost every one of those was followed up by a soft nudge toward reconciliation. "You two have been through so much together," or "We don't want to interfere, but maybe you could work it out." No one said it outright, but I knew they wouldn't be thrilled if they found out I had already filed for divorce. Which I had. I hadn't blocked Matthew on anything yet. But not because I wanted to talk. I just didn't know what I wanted anymore. He kept texting, calling, leaving voicemails. But I hadn't replied. Then, last night, his mom texted me. She said there was an explanation, but that Matthew needed to be the one to give it. She basically implied that I shouldn't shut him out completely without hearing his side. I replied and told her I didn't need to hear anything because I already knew the truth. I had read it with my own eyes, in black and white. What else could he possibly say that would undo that? But she pushed again. She said maybe I had seen the truth on paper, but hearing him out would still matter. That not doing so would only make the situation worse, especially considering the entire family was still grieving Colin and Jackie's deaths. She said this would break Matthew completely. So yeah, I'm stuck in this awful place where I don't know what's right. I honestly don't. Am I wrong for refusing to talk to my husband after finding out he's actually the father of the baby we were supposed to adopt as his niece? Update 1. After reading through everyone's comments on the original post, I decided to talk to Matthew after all. Up until that point, I hadn't responded to a single one of his messages or calls. But something in those comments made me feel like maybe I did need to hear him out. So I opened our chat and sent him a message, telling him I was ready to talk. He hadn't written much in the past few days, mostly just said he wanted to talk and that he needed to explain. Honestly, I didn't expect much. I thought it was just going to be more of the same. But when we met this morning, and he came to see me in person, it shook me a little. He looked awful. Completely worn down. He started by apologizing for hiding the truth from me for so long. And then, he told me that he and Jackie had only been together once. He told me that he and Jackie had only been together that one time, and that it meant nothing to either of them. He said they both deeply regretted it. But honestly, I didn't buy it. It just didn't feel real to me. My gut told me there was more to the story. And now that Jackie's gone, there's no way for me to ever know the full truth. According to Matthew, the whole thing happened during a time when he and I were fighting, something small and petty, he claimed, though he couldn't even remember what it was about. Jackie and Colin were also arguing then, and apparently, Colin had stormed off too. Matthew said he'd gone to Colin's place to talk, but when he got there, only Jackie was home. She looked upset, and when he asked what was wrong, she broke down crying. She invited him inside and confided in him that they'd been fighting over starting a family. Colin wanted a baby, but Jackie didn't feel ready yet. That's what caused the blow-up, and Colin had walked out. So there they were, both upset, both feeling alone, and Matthew says one thing led to another, and they ended up sleeping together. He told me that afterward, he didn't come home until really late, and that Jackie just needed someone to be there for her in that moment. That was the reason he stayed. He apologized and admitted it was a massive mistake. He said that afterward, he and Jackie agreed to never talk about it again. They convinced themselves it was a one-time thing that would never happen again because they truly loved the people they were with, me and Colin, and didn't want to hurt us. Funny how that worked out. Shortly after that, Jackie found out she was pregnant. Despite saying she wasn't ready for kids, she went ahead with the pregnancy. According to Matthew, she didn't want to break Colin's heart. So the secret continued. Jackie and Matthew agreed to never tell us the truth. Jackie and Colin would raise the baby as their own, and the whole thing would be buried. Jackie, being a lawyer, handled all the paperwork. She was able to keep Matthew's name on the birth certificate without Colin ever noticing. Colin trusted her completely, so he never questioned anything, not the documentation, not the timelines. Jackie had made sure that, in the event something happened to her, the child would legally go to Matthew. It was smart planning, I'll give her that. It baffles me how Colin never figured any of it out. Nearly a year passed and he had no idea. Maybe he was just too wrapped up in loving his daughter to worry about paperwork. Maybe he just trusted Jackie blindly. But as clever as they thought they weren't careful enough. Leaving those documents in the baby's bag? That's how I found out. That's how the truth unraveled. Once Matthew finished telling me everything, I looked him straight in the eye and said it didn't matter. It was too late for explanations. I had already spoken to my lawyer and started the process to file for divorce. Nothing he said changed how I felt. I'd been hoping that he had something to say that would make sense of it all, something that might make me reconsider. His family had begged me to talk to him, acted like a conversation would fix everything. But after hearing the truth, it only solidified what I already knew. I was absolutely right to walk away. You don't come back from this kind of betrayal. Not after 12 years of commitment. Not after something this big and this deliberate. Matthew started begging me to give him another chance. He told me he couldn't live without me. He said he'd already lost his brother and one of his best friends, and he couldn't stand to lose me too. He said he needed me. And all I could think was, what about what I lost? I lost Colin too. I lost Jackie. The four of us were inseparable, and now everything is shattered because of him. Because of them. I don't hold a grudge against Jackie, she's gone, and there's no sense in holding anger towards someone who can't answer for it anymore. But Matthew? I can't forgive him. Not now. Not ever. Even as I stood there grieving, trying to stay composed, he was still thinking about his pain. About how hard this was for him. Not once did he stop to think about what I was going through. In just 1 month, I lost 2 people I loved deeply, and then found out my husband had betrayed me in the most heartbreaking way imaginable and had a child with someone I considered family. Still, I've tried to handle all of this with as much dignity as I can. I told Matthew exactly how I felt, but he didn't stop. He kept begging, kept pleading, until finally I had to shut it down. I told him to leave. I warned him that if he didn't, I'd have to call the police. And when he still wouldn't go, I followed through. He finally left, but not quietly. He said he wasn't giving up, that he'd keep coming back until I took him back. But the truth is, none of that matters anymore. He broke something in me I didn't even know could break. And I hate that I gave him the chance to explain. I don't know what I was expecting, but at least now, I know everything. And now, I can move on without him. Update 2. It's been about a week and a half since I left our home. I just got off the phone with my lawyer. He told me the divorce papers are finally being served tomorrow. My emotions are all over the place. Part of me is relieved that the process is finally starting. It was delayed because my lawyer had some medical issues and things moved slower than I hoped. But now, we're moving forward. Another part of me is heartbroken. This marriage, which used to mean everything to me, is ending in the worst way possible. It's hard to let go of something that used to feel so beautiful. Losing Colin and Jackie was already more than I could handle. Now I'm going through a divorce too. But I'm doing my best to hold on to the silver lining. This is a step toward healing. And hopefully, the divorce won't be as emotionally exhausting as everything else has been. Update 3. Today, Matthew was officially served. And like clockwork, he showed up at my parents' house. Again. Probably hoping that seeing me in person would somehow change my mind. I had already gone back to ignoring him and had blocked most of his family. I didn't have anything else to say to them. Their true colors were showing. All those years, I thought they loved me, but now I realize they only cared about me because I was Matthew's wife. Not because of who I was. They weren't concerned about what he did to me. All they cared about was keeping us together. My mother-in-law even told me that now that Jackie was gone, I didn't have to worry anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. To speak so cruelly about someone who just died, someone who was supposed to be family. It was disgusting. That was the final straw. I blocked them all. As for Matthew, when he came to our house, my dad was the one who answered the door. Matthew was pounding on it like a madman, demanding to be let in. My dad told him clearly, "Leave now, or we'll call the cops." But Matthew just smirked and told him to go ahead. He said he wasn't leaving until he'd spoken to me. What he forgot was, he wasn't talking to me. He was talking to my dad, and my dad doesn't play games. So he called the police. Matthew was removed from our property, kicking, screaming, making a total scene. It was humiliating, and I just watched from my window, not even bothering to go outside. There was no point. I'm grateful my dad handled it. Because even after everything, I still had a soft spot for Matthew. If it had been up to me, I might not have followed through. But my dad had no reason to show mercy, and frankly, I'm glad he didn't. Update 4. Matthew blocked me. That's right, I didn't block him. He blocked me. I honestly laughed when I saw it. I wasn't contacting him at all, so why bother? All it means is that now, it'll be harder to communicate through the divorce. But hey, that's his choice. Shortly after, I got an email from his mother. She was furious that we called the police on her son. She said she couldn't believe we treated him like a criminal when he was just trying to get his wife back. She made it sound like we were the villains. She didn't acknowledge that Matthew had been the one acting out of control. That he ignored clear warnings. She ended the email by saying her son wouldn't be bothering me anymore, and that she was going to help him move on. Well, good luck to her. I hope they both find peace, honestly. I'm focused on something else now, getting through this divorce and getting what I deserve. No sympathy. No second chances. No soft spots left. It's over.